So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wow, 19 years. 19 years have passed since the Supreme Court of Taiwan issued its landmark decision declaring Tai Ji Men innocent of all criminal charges, including tax evasion. It was a decision that should have closed a long and painful chapter. Instead, it became the beginning of a new one. As we gather for this webinar, marking the anniversary of that decision, it is important to recall not only the legal clarity of the ruling, but also the bureaucratic resistance that followed. The National Taxation Bureau, confronted with a definitive judicial pronouncement, continued to impose ill-founded tax bills. Only after years of litigation and public scrutiny did it finally agree to correct all bills to zero, except one, the infamous 1992 bill, maintained on a technicality and used in 2020 as the basis for the nationalization of land Tai Ji Men regards as sacred. When I reflect on the Tai Ji Men case, I recall another situation in which I was somewhat involved, one that unfolded in Europe rather than Asia, and concerned a minority whose suffering was long overlooked. In 2011, while serving as the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, representative on combating racism, xenophobia, and religious intolerance, I participated in an OSCE country visit to Switzerland to assess its human rights situation. I met with associations representing the Yenish, a community that has endured one of the most grievous violations of human rights in modern Swiss history. The Yenish are a historically itinerant social group found in Switzerland, Austria, and Germany, whose identity is rooted not in a distinct ethnicity. They are not a people, but in a shared cultural experience of marginalization, mobility, and craftsmanship. In other words, they are poor people who decided centuries ago to live a nomadic life, but unlike the Rom, they do not share ethnicity. They form a minority defined by social history rather than biological descent, with many members descending from impoverished or stigmatized families who adopted an itinerant lifestyle and developed their own traditions and forms of solidarity. For decades, Yenish children were forcibly removed from their families and placed in foster homes, psychiatric institutions, or labor settings under the auspices of Pro Juventute, a semi-state agency whose actions were justified by discriminatory and racist stereotypes portraying the Yenish as socially unfit. The official figure of Yenish children separated from their families 590, but records are incomplete, and there may have been some thousands of cases. The program lasted well into the 1970s, and its consequences scarred generations. Swiss courts had repeatedly ruled that these placements were illegal. Yet the bureaucracies responsible for child services and Pro Juventute itself resisted acknowledging wrongdoing for decades. Even after courts finally ended the program, they delayed compensation, minimized responsibility, and often treated the victims' claims as administrative inconveniences rather than moral imperatives. When I was at the OSCE, I urged Switzerland to recognize what had happened to the Danish children as a crime against humanity. Although this recognition could not be achieved during my tenure, the process continued. In 2025, the Swiss Federal Council finally acknowledged the truth, officially declared the placement of Yenish children in foster care a crime against humanity, and issued a national apology. It was a moment of long overdue justice. The Yenish case and the Tai Ji Men case are profoundly different in their historical context. Yet they share two structural parallels that illuminate the challenges democracies face when confronted with bureaucratic wrongdoing. The first parallel concerns bureaucratic inertia. In both cases, courts spoke clearly and early. Swiss courts declared the forced placements illegal. Taiwan's Supreme Court declared Tai Ji Men innocent. Yet, in both cases, administrative agencies refused to internalize the judicial findings. Bureaucrats continued to behave as if the courts had never ruled, clinging to their earlier assumptions, defending their past actions, and resisting any acknowledgement of having violated fundamental rights. This inertia is not merely a matter of institutional pride. It reflects a deeper structural problem. Bureaucracies often operate with a logic of self-preservation, and when confronted with evidence of wrongdoing, they may prefer to reinterpret, delay, or ignore judicial decisions rather than admit error. The Yenish case shows how this resistance can last for decades. The Tai Ji Men case shows how it can persist even in the face of repeated judicial victories and public scrutiny. The second parallel concerns transitional justice. Switzerland is a consolidated democracy that has never experienced an authoritarian period. Yet scholars of transitional justice, including those who have analyzed the Yenish case, recognize that democracies can nonetheless produce systemic discrimination and human rights violation. The Yenish case is now widely regarded as the most egregious example of such violations in Swiss history. But precisely because Switzerland remained democratic, applying transitional justice principles proved difficult. Transitional justice traditionally addresses abuses committed under authoritarian regimes. When abuses occur within a democracy, the framework becomes less intuitive, and political actors may resist acknowledging that democratic institutions can produce grave injustice. A similar difficulty exists in Taiwan. Taiwan has established traditional transitional justice mechanisms to address violations committed during the authoritarian period of martial law and beyond, but only until April 30, 1991. This chronological limit creates a conceptual blind spot. It assumes that once the authoritarian period formally ended, the bureaucratic practices that had enabled the human rights violations also ended. Yet, the Tai Ji Men case began in 1996, 5 years after the period covered by transitional justice provision. It emerged from the same bureaucratic culture that operated under authoritarianism. The persistence of these practices into the democratic era demonstrates that transitional justice cannot be confined to a calendar. The comparison between the Jienish and Tai Ji Men cases thus highlights a broader lesson. Democracies, whether in Europe or Asia, must ensure that bureaucracies follow court decisions. When bureaucrats ignore them, the legitimacy of democratic governance is undermined. Also, limiting transitional justice to a specific period risks overlooking the very mechanisms that allow violations to continue. As someone who has been involved in both cases, one in Europe, one in Asia, I feel strongly that the lessons they offer are universal. The Yenish waited decades for recognition and apology came only last year. Tai Ji Men is waiting for full justice. In both cases, courts spoke clearly, but bureaucrats resisted. In both cases, transitional justice was long constrained by artificial boundaries. And in both cases, the victims demonstrated extraordinary resilience, insisting that the truth be acknowledged and justice be done. Both cases call us to continue the work of strengthening democratic institutions, ensuring accountability, and affirming that human rights must be protected not only by courts, but also by the bureaucracy that should implement their ruling. These few words served as an introduction to the webinar, and we can now start the first session with our first speaker, Dr. René Wadlow, President of the Association of World Citizens, who is not with us today, but will speak through a video.
Dear friends, as President of the Association of World Citizens, a non-governmental organization in consultative status with the United Nations, it is a profound honor to join you for this forum marking the 19th anniversary of the redress of the Tai Ji Men human rights case. The World Citizens Association has long been concerned with Taiwan's efforts to strengthen democracy and human rights. In 2013, I participated as an international observer in Taiwan's first international review of the implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. I returned in 2014 to observe the legal communities and the government's follow-up efforts to implement the review's recommendations. Regrettably, more than a decade later, many of the same systemic problems remain unresolved. During this year's fourth international review, a civil society report once again highlighted deeply rooted issues, including the weaponization of tax laws and the ineffectiveness of administrative remedies, demonstrating that these systemic failures continue to harm innocent citizens. The 30-year Tai Ji Men case has repeatedly been cited as a representative example of these institutional shortcomings. While we have consistently recognized Taiwan's outstanding contributions to addressing global public health challenges, we firmly believe that the protection of taxpayers' human rights is equally fundamental. Upholding tax justice and ensuring effective legal remedies are indispensable to the protection of human rights and the rule of law, not only for Taiwan but for the global community as a whole. Today, we focus on a critical challenge to those very rights: unjust taxation and the need for systemic reform. The Tai Ji Men case has become a mirror reflecting the health of Taiwan's human rights landscape. It is a case that was conjured from thin air in 1996 through illegal prosecution and fabricated evidence. Despite the Supreme Court's final judgment in 2007, which declared Tai Ji Men innocent of all charges, including tax evasion, and led to state compensation for the defendants, the administrative burden of illegal tax bills has persisted and the case has still not been vindicated. The Association of World Citizens believes that taxation is the foundation of a prosperous state, but illegitimate tax collection severely impacts fundamental rights to property and life. This is why we introduced the Declaration on Taxpayers' Human Rights, emphasizing that a fair and equitable taxation process is paramount for national development. In the Tai Ji Men case, the injustice regarding the 1992 tax year is particularly concerning. While the National Taxation Bureau has corrected the tax assessments for 5 other years, 1991, 1993 to 1996, to zero, acknowledging that Tai Ji Men is a practice center and not a cram school, they have singled out 1992 for forced execution. This treatment violates the constitutional principle of equality and the principle of administrative self-binding. It is a violation of integrity for the authorities to ignore their previous promises made in the legislative yuan to withdraw these enforcement actions. For 60 years, Tai Ji Men has been dedicated to the safeguarding and promotion of traditional culture. This lengthy tax issue has drained time and energy that would be better spent on these high cultural aims. In closing, we are confident that just as Taiwan has taken a lead in global health, it can now bring its taxation policies and procedures to a higher level of justice. We urge the government to fulfill its moral and legal obligations under the two covenants, rectify the error of the 1992 tax assessment, and end this 30-year-old false case. This is a major responsibility that requires the united efforts of both the people of Taiwan and global citizens. May justice finally prevail. Thank you all.
And after this presentation by our friend Dr. Wodrow takes a deep interest in the Tai Ji Men case, let me introduce the second speaker of this third session, Francesco Curto, who is an attorney in Torino, Italy, and is also the co-founder and vice president of Fedinsieme, meaning Faith Together, a committee promoting interreligious dialogue and cooperation. Francesco Curto, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Today we remember one date, July 13, 2007. On that day, Taiwan Supreme Court said one clear word: not guilty. Dr. Hong Tao-tse, his wife, and his student were found innocent of all charges: fraud, tax, evasion. The court said the red envelopes from a student to the master are gift, not income, no tax. It sounded like the end of the story, but it was the start of a lesson for all of us. Let's go back to the 1996. On December 19, police raided the 19 Tai Ji Men Academy across Taiwan. The leader was arrested. Why? Politics. Tai Ji Men did not support one candidate, so the government called them Shezhao. For 11 years, they faced court, jail, frozen bank account, and bad news story. The media called them cult. In 2003, a court said not guilty. In 2005, the appeal court said the same. In 2007, the Supreme Court closed the criminal case, and Taiwan paid them for the time in jail. This should be the end, but it was not, because the tax office did not follow the Supreme Court. They kept one tax bill from 1992. In 2020, they used that one bill to take sacred land in Miauli. Land for peace, land for learning, for self-cultivation. This is what we call administrative injustice. A legal win, but not real justice. So, why is Tai Ji Men important to us? Because their answer was not anger, it was action. In the last 10 years, Tai Ji Men built a network for truth. Social mobilization, peaceful protest in Taiwan, in Washington DC, and in Europe. Not to ask a special right, to ask for equal right under the law. Webinars with international experts since 2022, every 2 months with Chesnur and Human Rights Without Frontiers, scholar, lawyer, and activist came together. Names like Massimo Introvigne, Alessandra Micarelli, Willy Foutrem, Marco Respinti, these were open meeting to explain what happened when a label becomes persecution. Civic diplomacy. They brought the case to the United Nations. On January 11, 2025, Taiwan's Judicial Day, the UN Human Rights Council talked about Tai Ji Men because an independent court must mean fair treatment for everyone. Tai Ji Men is not only a legal case, it's a school. For almost 60 years, it was taught one thing: how to be good citizen. It means self-discipline, respect, hospitality, honesty, responsibility to the community, care for others. When a young person joins to Tai Ji Men, they do not learn only Qigong or martial arts. They learn to protect something higher, human dignity. If a group that build good citizen is treated like a danger, then the problem is how we see difference. In closing, July 13 is not just an anniversary. It's a reminder. It's a remind us that justice does not end with a court paper. It's end when that paper become real. Tai Ji Men won in court in 2007. It's still winning today because it's never stopped talking and acting with dignity. Our job now is to stand with that dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco Curto, and we continue our first session with another great friend of Tai Ji Men and advocate for the Tai Ji Men case, Alessandro Amicarelli, who is a human rights attorney in London, England, and the president of the European Federation for Freedom of Belief. Alessandro.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Massimo. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. My presentation is on a topic that it's been just hinted to by Francesco, which is accountability. Over 19 years ago, over 19 years have passed since July 13, 2007, when Taiwan Supreme Court spoke with absolute clarity. On that day, Tai Ji Men was declared completely innocent of all criminal charges, including tax evasion. The Supreme Court stated that once a and for all that the content of the red envelopes given by Tai Ji Men dizi disciples to the shifu, Grandmaster Dr. Hong, were gifts, not taxable income, contrary to the National Taxation Bureau, which had considered them tuition fees. The Supreme Court ruling was unambiguous, impartial, and final. Nonetheless, 19 years later, the ruling is still only partially implemented. In fact, while the National Taxation Bureau corrected all the other tax bills to zero, the 1992 bill was kept based on technicality, thereby allowing its use in 2020 to nationalize land that Tai Ji Men regards as sacred. This is not a mere administrative mistake or, in other words, an oversight. This is sheer state abuse and a constitutional failure. It demands accountability from those responsible for the failure. In any modern democracy based on the primacy of law, a Supreme Court is not just one institution among many. It is the guarantor of the constitutional order, and its rulings are binding on and guide all governmental bodies, agencies, and officials without exception. When an administrative body refuses to or does not implement a judgment of the Supreme Court, it commits a serious violation of various principles and provisions, undermining judicial authority. And by these acts, the rule of law is eroded and vanishes. This is precisely why we have repeatedly emphasized that the Tai Ji Men case is not only about Tai Ji Men. It is about the integrity of Taiwan's legal and constitutional system as a whole and a test of its maturity. The refusal, whether willful or de facto, to enforce the Supreme Court's final ruling is a direct breach of Articles 7, 16, and 23 of Taiwan's constitution that guarantee equality, the right to legal remedies, and proportionality in state action. It likewise violates the Administrative Procedure Act, the Tax Collection Act, and the fundamental principle that court rulings must be enforced rather than interpreted. When this principle is violated, the constitutional order is weakened. As Massimo Introvigne said in the introduction to this webinar, administrative agencies refused to internalize the judicial findings. Bureaucrats continued to behave as if the courts had never ruled. This is not unique to Taiwan, as evidenced by the Jenisch case in Switzerland, which shows how bureaucracies can resist court rulings for decades, even in mature democracies. This Taiwan-Switzerland parallel enlightens us about the bureaucrats' pattern of resistance that causes victims to suffer, institutions to lose their legitimacy, and justice to be delayed for generations. Tai Ji Men families have suffered this ordeal for 30 years since the beginning of the unlawful persecution by the public prosecutor, and 19 years since the final ruling of the Supreme Court. After all these years, it is time to affirm accountability. Accountability is not revenge. It's the only legal way in a democracy to prosecute those who made mistakes or willingly abused the law. In other words, it's the only way to maintain or restore the primacy of law when necessary, and to enable the nation to resist its own institutional failure. Those who refused to enforce the Supreme Court ruling, just as those who built up a judicial case based on intentionally false or non-existent evidence, must be held accountable for the violation of the Taiwanese constitution, which requires administrative agencies to obey judicial decisions, of the principles of legality, as they acted without lawful basis, at least after 2007, of fundamental human rights, such as freedom of religion or belief, property rights, and the right to fair administrative treatment, and of public trust in the state institutions, damaging Taiwan's international reputation as a beacon of democracy in Asia, committed to rule of law. Accountability for those who failed in the Tai Ji Men case is necessary not only for justice to Tai Ji Men itself, which certainly needs to be affirmed, but to ensure that in the future no individual, family, or group, whether religious, cultural, or otherwise, faces any similar abuses at the hands of public officials. As my colleague Francesco Curto, speaking today before me, just said, justice does not end with a court paper. It ends when that paper becomes real. Despite Tai Ji Men showing an incredible degree of patience and respect for the nation and its institutions, dignity and perseverance, waiting for justice to be fulfilled, 19 years later, that paper is still just a statement waiting to become reality. The struggle of Tai Ji Men has contributed to national progress and to the affirmation of Taiwan as a mature democracy. It is now time for Taiwan to complete the work that began on July 13, 2007, the time for accountability for those who abused the law and for justice to be enforced is today. Today's anniversary should resound not only as a commemoration, but rather as a warning. Bureaucrats are not in charge of reinterpreting final judgments or selecting the parts of the final ruling they like while ignoring the rest as they please. Constitutional rights do not depend on the discretion of tax officials or other bureaucrats. Rather, they are a test to be applied whenever the law is implemented. When public bodies' actions violate a constitutional principle, those actions are unlawful and illegitimate, no matter who implemented them. The constitutional principles serve as a test that should guide all actions taken by public officials. We all agree that over the years, Taiwan has made important progress in human rights and democratic values. In this regard, the adoption of the United Nations Human Rights Covenant into national legislation, despite Taiwan's non-membership in the UN, is a clear example of commitment to change. Despite these changes and positive progress, however, the Tai Ji Men case reveals as a structural weakness that must be addressed. In compliance with Article 24 of the Taiwanese Constitution, accountability is the only way forward to affirm justice for Tai Ji Men and to create a general pattern for the future. Article 24 of the Constitution of Taiwan reads, "Any public functionary who in violation of law infringes upon the freedom of or right of any person shall, in addition to being subject to disciplinary measures in accordance with law, be held responsible under criminal and civil laws. The injured person may, in accordance with the law, claim compensation from the state for damage sustained." End of quote. This will require, for instance, a full investigation to find out who caused the 2007 ruling not to be implemented, to take disciplinary or legal actions to prosecute the officials who acted outside the law, to adopt legislative reforms ensuring that administrative bodies must follow and implement judicial decisions, and to provide restoration of all confiscated property and full redress for all damages suffered. This will mean finally declaring justice for Tai Ji Men and affirming and restoring Taiwan's constitutional order. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Alessandro Micarelli, and this very clear and forceful speech concludes our first session. And I will now pass the podium to Willy Fautré, co-founder and director of Human Rights Without Frontiers, our co-sponsor, who will propose a short introduction to the second session and then introduce a video summarizing the Tai Ji Men case.
Thank you, Massimo. And so I will start first with my introduction to the second session. My introduction is titled From Presumption of Guilt to Total Innocence, but not in the media, the case of Tai Ji Men. In democratic societies, and Taiwan falls into this category, the principle that every person is presumed innocent until proven guilty is considered a cornerstone of justice. Yet, in the age of instant news, social media, and 24-hour reporting, the principle is increasingly overshadowed by the speed and reach of public suspicions and accusations. A person or an organization may ultimately achieve complete legal vindication in court after being falsely accused. But a legal victory in a courtroom is limited to a battlefield chosen by an enemy, waging its war on several front lines. Another front line is the media. And legal prosecution can sometimes just be a decoy to divert attention from the main theater of war, where the most destructive battle is in fact fought, the media. The place where the rule of law of the jungle dominates, the place where the rich and the powerful are the masters of the game, where they can impose their narratives. In many cases, winning a lawsuit is only a legal success on one battlefield. But in the meantime, the battle for public reputation has already been lost. False accusations often generate enormous public interest. New organizations compete to break sensational stories first, while social media users amplify headlines without waiting for evidence or legal proceedings. Allegations spread rapidly because they are dramatic, emotionally charged, and easy to share. Once a person's name becomes associated with criminal or unethical conduct, even wrongly, like Tai Ji Men, that association can become deeply embedded in public consciousness. The problem is not merely that accusations receive attention, but that later developments rarely receive equal treatment. Court proceedings can take months or years. By the time a judge dismisses the allegations or formally declares the accused innocent, the public has largely moved on. The legal decision may appear as a brief news item, buried deep inside a newspaper or mentioned in passing on a website. Many media outlets that devoted front page headlines to the accusations provide only minimal coverage of the acquittal or exoneration. This imbalance creates a serious injustice. Reputation is one of the most valuable assets an individual possesses. Careers can be destroyed, business can fail, friendship may dissolve, and families often suffer immense emotional stress. Tai Ji Men's leaders and dizi have experienced these things. Even after complete legal vindication, internet searches may continue to display old articles describing the accusations, while reports of the final judgment receive little visibility. The result is that many people remember the allegations but never learn the truth. Psychologists have long observed that first impressions are remarkably persistent. Once people have formed an opinion, later corrections often have limited impact. This means that a legal judgment, however decisive, may not erase the stigma created by extensive media exposure. In effect, the accused person has won the legal case, but lost the broader struggle for public trust. The media undoubtedly plays an essential role in informing society about matters of public interest. Reporting on criminal investigations, serious allegations can be legitimate and necessary. However, this responsibility should be matched by an equally strong commitment to reporting the final outcome with comparable prominence. If accusations justify headlines, then acquittals and findings of innocence deserve similar visibility. Balanced reporting is not only a matter of journalistic ethics, but also of fairness, a supreme value. The digital era further complicates this issue. Online articles remain searchable for years, and sensational headlines continue to circulate long after they have become inaccurate. Some jurisdictions have introduced mechanisms allowing individuals to request the removal or de-indexing of outdated or misleading information. But these remedies remain limited and often difficult to obtain. The law can correct a judicial record, but it cannot rewrite public memory. Ultimately, justice is more than a courtroom verdict. It also involves restoring the dignity, the reputation, and standing of those who have been wrongly accused. A society that celebrates accusations but neglects exonerations risks creating a system in which legal innocence offers only partial relief. True justice requires that the public be informed, not only when allegations are made, but also when they are proven false. Otherwise, a final legal victory may remain exactly that, a victory in a courtroom, but not in the court of global public opinion. Our periodic webinars about Tai Ji Men are a sacred memorial to truth and memory for the current and the next generations. And that's why they are so useful. Thank you for your attention. And now we will watch a video.
Tai Ji Men case is a false case conjured from thin air. In 1996, a prosecutor abused his authority by opening the case illegally, while tax officer colluded to provide false statements and fake evidences. As a result, a total of 6 years illegal tax bills, 1991 to 1996, were issued.
The tax bills issued for the 6 tax years in the Tai Ji Men tax case were abnormal and improper. They were not the result of an investigation conducted by frontline tax officers. Instead, they were created simply by copying information provided by prosecutors and investigators. After the Ministry of Finance's Appeals Committee revoked the original decision and sent the case back for further investigation, the National Taxation Bureau sent an official letter to the Taipei City Investigation Office of the Ministry of Justice on March 7, 2000, letter number Taipei National Taxation Bureau FASI number 89008316. In that letter, the Bureau explicitly acknowledged that the nature of the case and the assessed amounts in its original assessment were based entirely on the information and calculations provided by your office. This clearly demonstrates that, although this was presented as a tax case, no genuine tax investigation was ever conducted. It is conclusive evidence that the case was invalid from the very beginning, a baseless, fabricated accusation built on false charges and a deeply flawed process.
In 2007, the Supreme Court rendered a final and binding judgment that there was no criminal wrongdoing, no tax liability, and no violation of the Tax Collection Act. The defendants, who had been wrongfully detained during the proceedings, were later awarded state compensation for wrongful imprisonment in 2009.
After review through the criminal justice system, it was conclusively determined that the money in question constituted gifts to a teacher as a sign of respect and appreciation. It was deemed a gift rather than taxable income, and therefore there was no issue of income tax liability. Once the facts of a case have been established through a final and binding criminal court judgment, there is no valid reason for an administrative agency to disregard those findings. Those established facts should serve as the basis for the agency's decisions and actions.
The Control Yuan made investigation 2 times and in 2002 pointed out that the prosecutor's investigation process involved 8 major violations, including non-disclosure of investigations, illegal searches, failure to conduct investigations and verifications within the bounds of official authority, illegal freezing of assets, overstepping authority by ordering county and municipal governments to close down various martial arts schools, failure to legally notify the defendant's defense lawyer during interrogation. The prosecutor also acted in a rude and inappropriate manner and violated multiple provisions of the Code of Criminal Procedure. These violations seriously infringed upon the defendant's rights and damaged the prosecutor's image of impartial law enforcement. In 2009, the National Taxation Bureau was also censured by the Control Yuan for 7 major violations, including failing to comply with the statutory obligation of verifying the facts properly, failing to clarify the nature of the income on its own authority, and failing to adequately take into account the rights and interests of taxpayers. The Control Yuan has also classified the Tai Ji Men case as a major human rights case.
Our taxpayers' rights are almost non-existent. The case has been ruled not guilty by the court, the Control Yuan, and the Supreme Administrative Court, but National Taxation Bureau keep pestering them with the same tax bills.
You can visit the Control Yuan's website and check the 7 mistakes indicated. For each one of them, the National Taxation Bureau basically said, we made a mistake. In 2011, I told the then Minister of Finance that this case should be closed. He didn't take it as his own business.
After the Supreme Court's final ruling confirmed not guilty and no tax liability, the tax assessments for 5 tax years 1991 and 1993 to 1996 were all overturned through favorable rulings by the Supreme Administrative Court. The NTB has also corrected it to 0. Only the 1992 tax year was treated separately from the established facts. An unlawful tax assessment was imposed and forcibly enforced, leading to the illegal auction and state seizure of land that had been designated for a Tai Ji Men cultivation and practice center.
Government agencies cannot treat the same matter one way on one occasion and a different way on another. The same issue must be handled consistently. In other words, with respect to the tax bill for year 1992, its illegality is actually quite clear in substance. That's because for all the other years, the authorities have recognized that the same underlying situation was not subject to taxation, yet only year 1992 was taxed. This runs counter to the constitutional principle of equality, as well as the administrative law principle of administrative self-binding that is derived from it.
In fact, at a public hearing held by the Legislative Yuan on June 17, 2010, the Central Area National Taxation Bureau had already agreed, in accordance with the resolution reached at the hearing, to withdraw the enforcement action for the 1992 income tax case.
While the administrative agencies exercise administrative discretion, they have to ensure that people's human rights on taxation are protected, which is the most important spirit and objective.
If the Tai Ji Men case cannot be resolved, taxation human rights do not exist.
I know this issue has wasted too much time and resource. This is very serious, and it has shaken the 5 branches of government and the foundation of the nation.
Everyone involved is here today, and the documents are available for you to review. They're all right in front of you. You clearly understood that this is already a mistake. What you said previously has become doubtful. Continuing down the same wrong path is not the right thing to do. I urge the Ministry of Finance to reach a conclusion on this matter within the next 2 months. What are you going to do? How will you resolve it? Please stop delaying any further.
If the Central Area National Taxation Bureau submits the case up through the proper channels to the Ministry of Finance, that would be better. It is not fair to leave the responsibility solely with one regional tax office. Please send it up to the ministry. That is the point I want to make.
All right, let's proceed according to what the Deputy Minister just instructed. We will submit the Central Area National Taxation Bureau's position to the Ministry of Finance for review. Revoke it. We will have the Central Area National Taxation Bureau formally submit the proposal to the Ministry.
After the public hearing, the Minister of Finance issues an official letter to Legislator TN in July 22, 2010, and sent it to the Office of Legislator 2 Xingche as well, and then sent it to Legislator Justin Cho on the 30th. He stated clearly that they had asked the NTB of the Central Area to revoke the tax bill in accordance with the Article 40 of the Tax Collection Act. The NTB of the Central Area should have followed the document of the Ministry of Finance to revoke the execution, but it did not. On June 17, 2010, a public hearing was held. After reviewing the evidences, the Central Region National Taxation Bureau issued an official letter in 2010. In that letter, it stated that the assessments for the years 1991 through 1996 were all based on the same underlying facts. However, while the ruling for 1992 had already become final and binding, the other years were still at the administrative appeal stage. Therefore, if the determinations made for those other years were ultimately found to be inconsistent with the determination for 1992, the authorities would revoke the relevant disposition in accordance with Article 117 of Administrative Procedure Act. By 2010, the ruling for 1992 had already become final and binding. At that time, the tax authority explicitly stated that they would revoke the assessment pursuant to Article 117 if the determinations for the other years turned out to be inconsistent with that for 1992. Now, the tax bills for all of those other tax years have already been corrected to zero. So how can the National Taxation Bureau turn around and tell us that, because the 1992 judgment has become final and binding, they cannot revoke the assessment under Article 117? That is clearly a violation of the principle of integrity.
For 60 years since its establishment, the Tai Ji Men Qigong Academy has maintained the essence of its lineage of master-disciple transmission without any change and has never had any tax issues. The only exception in those 60 years is the completely different factual determination, which fully demonstrates the error in the tax treatment in 1992. Hundreds of domestic and international experts and scholars have issued a joint appeal, urging the Ministry of Finance and the National Taxation Bureau to immediately revoke the illegal tax bills, return the sacred site of practice to Tai Ji Men, end the 30-year-long fabricated case, and restore innocence and justice to Tai Ji Men master and disciples. Only then can democracy and the rule of law prevail, human rights be protected, and transitional justice be implemented.
That was an excellent and evidence-based overview of the Tai Ji Men case that I will summarize with 3 adjectives. Invalid. The Tai Ji Men case was absolutely invalid because there was no solid ground for prosecution, fabricated and false. And now we will really start the second session with the testimonies of the dizi. The first one is Tim Gao. The floor is yours, Tim.
Hello, Massimo, distinguished guests. It's an honor to be here with you today. 90 years ago, on July 30, 2007, the Supreme Court made a final judgment that completely cleared Tai Ji Men of all criminal charges. The court ruled that Tai Ji Men was innocent, owed no taxes, and did not violate the Tax Collection Act. They confirmed that the red envelopes given to Zhang Menren were tax-free gifts, and that the practice uniforms were just non-profit group purchases among dizis, which obviously had no business tax issues. Later, in 2009, the Zhang Menren and the dizis who had been illegally detained even received state compensation for wrongful imprisonment. This further proves that the Tai Ji Men case was a deliberate, fabricated setup from the very beginning. This judgment means the world to me. I'm a Tai Ji Men dizi, but I actually joined in 2006, 10 years after the case first started. I initially wanted to join because my wife and I were desperately trying to have kids, but nothing was working. Thankfully, we found Tai Ji Men and started practice Qigong. To our amazement, my wife's severe menstrual cramps, which had bothered her for 20 years, completely disappeared. 6 months later, she got pregnant, and we eventually had 4 children, having one every 2 years. But you know what? I almost missed out on all these happenings. Before I decided to join, I searched Tai Ji Men online and saw tons of negative news. I hesitated and had a lot of doubts. Luckily, we decided to follow our hearts. When the Supreme Court ruled in our favor a year later, I was so relieved we made the right choice. But I also felt heartbroken for anyone who let false media reports scare them away from a happier life. What is really hard to accept, however, is that while the criminal case ended, the unfair tax bills, which were based on the same criminal case, kept tormenting us. Even though Tai Ji Men won 18 times through administrative appeals and lawsuits, and the National Taxation Bureau finally admitted their mistake in 2019 by reducing 5 years of tax bills to 0. They adamantly refused to revoke the 1992 tax bill. Because of this, our sacred land in Miaoli was illegally auctioned off and confiscated by the state. Now speaking from the perspective of a legal professional, I must point out how flawed the Tax Bureau's reasoning is. Their only excuse for not canceling the 1992 bill is that there was already a final administrative court judgment on it. But that judgment happened before the 2007 Supreme Court decision proved our innocence. New facts have completely changed the foundation of that old tax judgment, and there were numerous flaws throughout the process. So, is a wrong court decision really impossible to overturn? Absolutely not. Let me quickly give you 3 real examples showing that under our current laws, the government can always revoke or correct wrong administrative decisions. First, the Xiao Xiaolin case. In 2007, this Taipei music teacher was fired after publicly opposing a city education policy. She fought back but lost the Supreme Administrative Court case in 2011. However, in 2013, the Control Yuan officially censured the city government. They cited major procedure flaws and likened the school's unfair process to shooting the arrow first and then drawing the target. Based on this investigation, the Taipei city government used Article 117 of the Administrative Procedure Act in 2016 to step in and revoke the illegal dismissal on their own authority. Second, the Su Yongsheng case. In 2010, this volunteer soldier tragically committed suicide after suffering severe abuse from his commanding captain. The Ministry of National Defense initially ruled it a death by illness, resulting in a much lower compensation. and his grieving family lost their administrative lawsuit. Later, a criminal court officially convicted the captain of abusing a subordinate to death. Despite the father already losing in the Supreme Administrative Court, legal scholars and legislators intervened. A panel of experts concluded that the new criminal conviction proved the original administrative ruling was severely flawed. Consequently, in 2021, the ministry applied Article 117 to revoke their original decision. They reclassified his death as on duty and issued the proper compensation. Third, the Zhong Zhaohuan case. In 2012, Mr. Zhong dissolved his struggling company, but accidentally forgot to file the following year's corporate tax return. The tax bureaus arbitrarily used standard industry profit margins to hit him with a 47 million NTD tax bill and a 7 million penalty. He also lost his case at the Supreme Administrative Court. Eventually, with assistance from the Control Yuan, taxpayer ombudsman, and the professional CPAs, he submitted the correct paperwork. The tax bureau agreed to correct the error, dropping the massive bill to zero and even refunding his interest. Legally speaking, when tax bureau discover an error, they can easily use Article 17 of the Tax Collection Act or Article 101 of the Administrative Procedure Act to simply correct it. From a legal standpoint, these cases prove that the tax bureau's excuse is just a smoke screen. It is not that they cannot fix the 1992 bill, they just don't want to. Under the law, they could easily use Article 117 of the Administrative Procedure Act to revoke it. They could use Article 111 to declare it void due to obvious measure of laws, or they could use Article 101 to simply correct it. All of these options are legally sound and backed by real precedents. To conclude, transitioning from an authoritarian era to a truly democracy is never easy. The real value of a democratic government is having the courage to correct the mistakes of the past. The Tai Ji Men test case is an undeniable error, one investigated by the Control Yuan, cleared by the Supreme Court, and even partially admitted by the Tax Bureau itself. Legally and morally, there is no reason not to resolve this immediately. On this important anniversary of our judicial vindication, I urge the government to follow the law, clear Tai Ji Men's name completely, and return our unlawfully confiscated land. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for sharing with us your legal analysis of the possible legal avenues that could and still can be used to allegedly correct an administrative error. Concrete cases that you described show that it was possible to use three articles, Article 117, 111, and 101 of the Administrative Procedure Act. It was not done, and obviously there was political will not to do it. This is religious discrimination and an egregious violation of religious freedom. And now I will give the floor to Joyce Huang. The floor is yours, Joyce.
Thank you. So, dear Massimo, distinguished scholars, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Joyce. And so this year I will begin my Master of Management Analytics at the University of Toronto in Canada. And in addition to my studies, I'm also a Tai Ji Men dizi. So, in recent years, our world has been filled with uncertainty and turmoil. Wars, extreme weather, earthquakes, and wildfires have brought suffering to communities around the globe. Society is overwhelmed by anxiety, conflict, and insecurity. I believe many of us share this feeling, and the weight of the world can often seem overwhelming as we are constantly surrounded by negative news. So, how can I use what I have learned to bring positive change to the world? This is a question I often ask myself. Data, technology, and artificial intelligence are rapidly transforming our world. Yet it is not technology itself that determines our future, but the people and values behind it. So to me, the true purpose of learning is to use our knowledge to solve problems and create a positive impact on society. As a dizi of Tai Ji Men, an ancient minpai of Qigong and martial arts, I've also learned from my shifu the wisdom of how to conduct myself and interact with others, as well as the importance of inner growth. Through this practice, I have learned to develop greater self-awareness, to see the world from different perspectives, and to care more deeply about humanity. Last August, guided by my shifu, we actively participated in a cultural goodwill mission to 5 Caribbean nations. Before arriving there, my understanding of the Caribbean came mostly from textbooks and movies, but standing on that land, I came to realize that beneath its breathtaking beauty lies a history of profound suffering. The Caribbean was once one of the world's darkest centers of colonialism and slavery. And in the Independence Square in St. Kitts and Nevis, enslaved Africans were sold publicly. At Bloodley River, countless innocent lives were lost. At Devil's Bridge in Antigua and Barbuda, some enslaved people unable to endure the suffering or see any hope for the future choose to live from the cliffs rather than continue living in bondage. Standing in these historic places, I realized that history is not merely written in textbooks. It still echoes through the land and the memories of the people. Yet, what impressed me most was the people. They were warm, genuine, and welcoming, while at the same time humble and remarkably resilient. Their eyes reflect the pain of history, but even more, they revealed a quiet determination to move beyond it. And they work with dedication, treat others with sincerity, and immediately embrace the message of peace that we brought with us. That journey taught me an unforgettable lesson. Although we cannot erase the darkness of history, we can always choose to stand in the light. Through our songs, cultural performances, heartfelt prayers, and genuine smiles, I realized that even simple acts of kindness can become seeds of hope. And the Tai Ji Men case has now lasted for more than 30 years, longer than I have been alive. This year also marks the 19th anniversary of the Supreme Court's final ruling, which confirmed that Tai Ji Men was innocent, owed no taxes, and had not violated Taiwan's Tax Collection Act. Yet, despite this legal victory, the government's mistakes have never been fully corrected. This is not merely a story of the past, it remains a clear example of institutional failure, human rights violations, and the unfinished work of transitional justice in Taiwan. Just as the people of the Caribbean continue to live with the legacy of colonialism, Tai Ji Men has carried a burden it should never have had to bear. Based on an erroneous tax assessment, tax bills were never revoked despite the Supreme Court's ruling. As a result, sacred land intended for spiritual cultivation was auctioned and eventually confiscated by the government. For 3 decades, countless people have continued to seek justice not out of resentment, but in a hope that society will recognize the truth, that the government will acknowledge its mistakes, and that the system itself can be corrected. For me, this is not simply a public issue, it is part of my own family story. I stood I have stood in front of Taiwan's presidential office to peacefully call for justice. I've also stood outside the Hsinchu Administrative Enforcement Agency, witnessing the forced auction of our sacred land. At forums both in Taiwan and abroad, I have also shared this long and difficult journey. Every time I speak out, it takes courage because I know how painful December 19th 30 years ago was. It marks the beginning of a collective injustice caused by the abuse of public power. The suffering endured that day by my shifu, my shimu, and brothers and sisters should never be forgotten, nor should it ever be met with silence. This May, we once again traveled to Turkey to participate in the 29th Eurasian Economic Summit. During the summit, we present cultural performances entitled The Golden Peacock. Our shifu told us that the golden peacock symbolizes love, compassion, and the light of conscience that awakens the goodness within every heart. In Eastern tradition, it also represents the wisdom to transform suffering into hope. That is why, even after 3 decades of injustice, our Shifu has never taught us to respond with hatred. Instead, he has guided us to resolve conflicts through conscience and bring light to the road through love, peace, and compassion. It is precisely these places and these experiences that have led me as a young person to reflect on what I can do. As a student preparing to enter the fields of data analytics and artificial intelligence, I have come to realize that technology itself is not what truly moves the road forward. Technology is only a tool. What truly matters is the values and conscience of the people who create and use it. Change begins with each of us. Through empathy, responsibility, and the courage to do what is right, we can shape a more just and peaceful society. Finally, may our collective voice for justice encourage the Taiwanese government to confront past mistakes with courage, pursue meaningful reform, and bring the Tai Ji Men case to a just and complete resolution. May the values of conscience take root in every heart, inspiring us to build a world founded on peace, unity, justice, and sustainable development. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Joyce, for stressing that the Tai Ji Men case is not a story of the past, but has continued as a daily reality for decades in your family in particular, but also many other families. The challenge is what does your conscience tell you to do in such a situation? Certainly not to remain inactive, but certainly not either to respond with hatred and resentment, as your shifu has always taught you. keeping this memory alive in one way or another, as you do, and testifying as you are doing today in this webinar, is certainly not a vain action and a vain contribution. Thank you, Joyce. And now I will give the floor to Arthur Xie. The floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Massimo, and all the distinguished guests today. So 19 years ago today, some of the attendees repeat this number today. The Supreme Court final ruling was handed down. Tai Ji Men not guilty, not tax evasion. So today I want to speak about one specific thing, the red envelope gift, a token of gratitude offered by deeds to our shifu. For years, this gift has been distorted by the state into something it was never meant to be, tuition fees. I want to ask, human rights are inherent. They are not granted by the state to its people. When someone acts lawfully out of personal inner faith, should not the state, the nation, the government respect and protect? A nation's true strength lies not in how much power it holds, but in whether it puts its people first, governs by law, and honors the human rights that belong to every person by birth. So that ruling was clear: no crime, no tax evasion, and no violations of the Tax Collection Act. This means the law has already recognized the red envelope gift given by deeds to our shifu is not criminal proceeds of any kind. It is a lawful, voluntary gift. Taiwan's Income Tax Act states that property acquired through the gift is tax-exempt income. Under the Estate and Gift Tax Act, the party liable for gift tax is the donor, not the recipient. So in other words, when the deed gives a red envelope gift to shifu, it is an exercise of that deed's free right of disposal of our own after-tax income, once our tax obligations have already been fulfilled. So this right is also guaranteed under Article 765 of Taiwan Civil Code. So this is a gift given freely out of gratitude to my shifu, and its true nature should never be distorted. So when the shifu received a lawful voluntary red envelope gift given by deeds out of gratitude from income already taxed and can still be arbitrarily branded by state enforcement as fraudulent proceeds and pursued for back taxes. This is not the story of one mistaken case. It is a violation of human rights by the state. The freedom of religion protected under Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights is not only the freedom to believe, it includes the freedom to practice that belief through action. When a voluntary red envelope gift of gratitude to my shifu is excluded from that protection, the freedom only protects what happens inside our mind, not how you live out and what I believe. So that is also a violation of human rights. Alongside the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, Taiwan, although not a UN member state, has given both the force of domestic law to protect its people's belief, thoughts, and property. Tai Ji Men is not the only case. Once we allow this happen once, it will happen again to the next faith community and next ordinary family in Taiwan and in any country in the world. And for example, I want to take one example. Huang Wenhuang, a public interest lawyer in Taiwan, was appointed by the court to handle an estate worth just 926 NT dollars so little. And he also paid the paperwork fee by himself. But years later, the tax authority billed them over 112 million NT dollars for money he never touched. He was simply doing his duty, and even this can happen to a lawyer, it can happen to anyone. In Taiwan, the officials who assess taxes and penalties personally profit from them through a bonus system. Willie, founder of Human Rights Without Frontiers, has pointed out that on the Tai Ji Men case, that this creates a conflict of interest, a structural incentive for officials to abuse their power to tax. So Tai Ji Men shifu and dizi choose the hardest path. And also we choose the right one. We walked step by step through every lawful channel within the system. We went through 3 levels of criminal court, were found not guilty, and received state compensation for wrongful imprisonment. And in the administrative court, 5 years of tax assessment were reduced to 0. Only 1 year remains disputed after a procedural flaw that state seized the people's property. The control yuan investigated twice, finding 8 violations by the prosecutor and 7 violations by the tax bureau. And also the international NGOs have reported this case to the UN Human Rights Council 12 times. 25 international experts wrote to Taiwan's president, calling for an end to these violations. We have done everything that could be done, because speaking the truth is a citizen's most basic right and most powerful tool. And every word spoken leaves a record of this injustice, so that it cannot be buried by time, and so that those who came after us can see the truth of what happened here. So let me close with this question. When administrative power can bypass a final judicial ruling of innocence and continue to affect one person, one community for decades, this is not only Taiwan's problem. It is a flaw that any nation claiming to be governed by the rule of law must confront and must correct without delay. So let me say it once more. The red envelope gift is a lawful gift given by deeds out of our gratitude, freely and from the heart, and its true nature must never be arbitrarily redefined or distorted by anyone. Thank you.
And thank you, Arthur, for reminding us the hoax imagined by the National Taxation Bureau to strip Tai Ji Men of its assets. It was to transform the well-known individual red envelope gifts, to transform that like a magic trick into tuition fees so that they could be taxed. And 19 years after the decision of the Supreme Court declaring Tai Ji Men innocent of any wrongdoings, the reality is that justice is still being denied financially and morally, as you explained. Thank you. And now I will give the floor to Ella Lee. You're welcome, Ella.
Thank you, Willie. Distinguished international experts, scholars, and human rights defenders, and dear friends joining us online today. Hello, everyone. My name is Ella. Professionally, I'm a career counselor, and in public affairs, I serve as an NGO representative for Taiwan's international review of the 2 covenants this year. But today, the title I'm most proud of is being a dizi of Tai Ji Men. I have been practicing Qigong for 18 years. The wisdom of yin and yang and the positive mindset I learned at Tai Ji Men have given me true psychological resilience. When facing difficulties, my Qigong practice helps me quickly regain my inner peace, allowing me to weather life storms with a calm heart. I'm deeply grateful to my shifu, Dr. Hong, the Grandmaster of Tai Ji Men, for equipping me with the life-changing skills I rely on today. Moreover, under the nurturing guidance of Tai Ji Men, I have transformed from a shy, timid, and self-doubting young adult into a middle-aged woman who can confidently stand on the international stage. I've had the honor of hosting events in front of heads of states from 20 different countries, spreading the message of love and peace to the world. Just this year, we traveled to the Bahamas in the Caribbean, where we hosted the Summit of Love and Peace at the Governor's House, inviting many distinguished guests to ring the bell of world peace and love. My shifu always teaches us, as long as we work hard and persevere, the seed of love and peace will one day take root in everyone's heart. Across the globe, heads of state have shown immense respect for my shifu, Dr. Hong, recognizing Tai Ji Men's remarkable contributions to the world. However, when I return to my hometown, Taiwan, these international honors are met with a stark and truly heartbreaking contrast. In Taiwan, the government has treated Tai Ji Men with smear campaigns and state violence over a quarter century. Taiwan Supreme Court ruled in its third instance that Tai Ji Men was not guilty of tax evasion or violating the Tax Collection Act, but the NTB, the National Taxation Bureau, continued to issue illegal tax bills for 6 separate years. Tai Ji Men is a Qigong and martial arts spiritual group. Since ancient times, the respectful offerings given by disciples to their grandmaster have been a cultural expression of traditional etiquette and gratitude. And by modern legal definitions, these are tax-exempt gifts. This is the standard for thousands of martial arts and spiritual groups in Taiwan, but Tai Ji Men was singled out. Tragically, the failure of the administrative relief system turned this fabricated farce into a real-life tragedy. In August 2020, the NTB collaborated with the Administrative Enforcement Agency. They forcibly seized, auctioned, and confiscated our sacred cultivation land in Miaoli. Simply relying on the 1992 tax bill they knew was illegal. I can still remember that the moment when I heard the news that our land was auctioned off, I was heartbroken. I couldn't believe that state violence could bully its people to such an extreme. If a group as large as Tai Ji Men, one with the ability to advocate for itself internationally, can be subjected to such ruthless bullying, what should other ordinary, defenseless Taiwanese people do when they face an unjust system? Take the case of Mr. Zhang, a victim of tax injustice. His company went bankrupt due to a failed investment, yet he received a bogus tax bill from the NTB. As a result, a travel ban was placed on him. To make sure he could still work for a living, he was stranded overseas for 9 years, unable to return home. This disproportionate measure severely stripped people of their freedom of movement and their right to family reunion. It is how state violence destroys ordinary lives. Taiwan's current tax system often uses travel ban as a punitive tool to force tax payment. However, data shows that the rate of people actually paying off their taxes after a travel ban is less than 5%. This proves that the measure is unnecessary and ineffective. As a career counselor, I pay much attention on legislation on workplace. Just this month, Taiwan has passed a law of preventing workplace bullying. Employers now have a legal obligation to protect victims, and the violators would face heavy fines. While this legislation protects citizens, it highlights a glaring double standard for me. Workplace bullying is taken seriously and punished severely, but what about the state bullying its own people? When state power becomes the abuser committing state bullying against its citizens, the people have nowhere to turn. Officials who break the law and abuse their power not only go unpunished, but are often promoted. What a profound injustice. And this year, participating as an NGO in Taiwan's international review of the Two Covenants, I raised my concerns regarding these travel bans. During my dialogue with the committee members, I was devastated to realize that human rights in Taiwan are actually regressing in certain legal and tax areas. In the International Review Committee's concluding observations this year also emphasized that the legality and proportionality of exit controls must be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. They stressed the necessity of ex post facto judicial reviews to ensure proportionality and due process. We have not given up until today. My shifu tells us that even in the face of such massive injustice, we must still respond with love and peace. Although the progress is slow, we know deep down that only by taking action can we see a future. Doing nothing guarantees hopelessness. Our efforts have never been solely for Tai Ji Men's own rights. We do this so that every citizen on this land can live and work in peace under a healthy and conscience-driven system. Today, on the 19th anniversary of the Supreme Court ruling that declared Tai Ji Men innocent, I want to use this international forum to loudly call upon the Taiwanese government, please face this historical mistake, revoke the illegal tax bills, and return Tai Ji Men's sacred cultivation land, and ensure that the human rights spirits of the Two Covenants is no longer just empty talk, but the reality that truly protects everyone. We will keep fighting until the day true justice arrives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella, for placing a high value on justice and fairness in your presentation. As a consultant with the experience of a consultant for the Two Covenants that we have already talked about. And also thank you for reminding the government that it should uphold the rule of law. Yeah, the rule of law and correct wrongful actions. Your testimony really demonstrates perseverance and calls for continued advocacy despite years of setbacks and disappointments. And last but not least, you also stressed that protecting justice benefits not only Tai Ji Men, but all Taiwanese citizens. Thank you very much. And now I will give the floor to Yi Zhang Xiu, a retired Sergeant Major. The floor is yours.
Dear Professor Massimo and all the great experts and scholars. Hello everyone, I was previously a Sergeant Major in the Army and am currently an environmental engineering technician. Before I entered Tai Ji Men to practice Qigong, I often unreasonably scolded my fellow soldiers due to emotional problems, which led to frequent complaints during my military service. In addition, I had a playful personality and spent a lot of money on motorcycles, incurring a $1 million loan. My long-term emotional instability caused me to break up with my girlfriend. Later, through the care and recommendation of my colleagues, I had the opportunity to enter Tai Ji Men and follow Dr. Hong Taozu to practice Qigong. After practicing Qigong, my first and greatest benefit was that I gradually learned to adjust and calm my emotions, to have introspective dialogue, to see my mistakes, and to correct them. Later, due to the stability of my mind, my performance at work improved significantly. Practicing Qigong changed my personality and how I interacted with family and friends, and it also improved my luck. I was able to save money and pay off my debts. The most noticeable improvement in my health from Qigong was the reduction of my long-standing nasal problems, a constant runny nose like a faucet, and the frostbite that plagued my hands and feet every winter. My right palm also suffered from severe eczema, covered in blisters and peeling skin. After Qigong adjustments, my constitution changed dramatically. My eczema completely healed within 6 months of starting Qigong. The first winter after starting, I didn't experience frostbite again, and my chronic nasal problems were significantly improved through the breathing methods of Tai Ji Men Qigong. This tremendous transformation surprised and delighted my family, so I recommended my father, mother, elder sister, younger sister, and brother-in-law, who subsequently became disciples of Tai Ji Men. Although joining Tai Ji Men has significantly changed my life, the Tai Ji Men case, involving over 400 unverified, serialized reports in the media for more than 6 months, smeared, defamed, and prejudicially concluded cases, still cause misunderstandings among some of my family and colleagues. They believe that the reports and information released to the media by Prosecutor Ho Kwon-jin and the National Taxation Bureau were accurate. During a casual conversation with a colleague, when we talked about practicing Qigong at Tai Ji Men, he questioned my words because he had seen inaccurate media reports that we could buy a hat for 50,000 NTD. I was surprised and saddened, and smiled at my senior, saying, "Senior, do you think this is true? You have to trust my character." In fact, at Tai Ji Men, we practice Qigong, learn to improve ourselves, and act with conscience. We do not engage in any profit-making or sales activities within Tai Ji Men. Therefore, the media's erroneous reports without prior investigation have forced me to spend a lot of time explaining the misunderstandings to my relatives and friends over the years. Although most of them believe my explanations, what saddens me the most is that even with years of effort and clarification, it is impossible to restore the clean and innocent reputation of Tai Ji Men. This case exposed me to the arrogance and unreasonableness of the judicial and tax systems. Between 2019 and 2023, I followed the pilgrimage group to Baishitan Matsu Temple, walking nearly 400 kilometers 3 times. My straw hat and vest were embroidered with the words, "True Tax and Legal Reform," intended to raise awareness among Taiwanese people about the importance of tax and legal reform and the appalling violence within Taiwan's judicial and tax systems. In 2023, just after the pandemic ended, I shouldered a backpack embroidered with "True Tax and Legal Reform, Saving Taiwan with Conscience," and walked around Taiwan, covering 1,145 kilometers in 41 days. Along the way, many people encouraged and cheered me on. Some, who had faced malicious harassment and tax audits from the National Taxation Bureau because of their businesses, strongly supported my actions and offered their blessings. A core issue I saw in the Tai Ji Men case was that the National Taxation Bureau, relying solely on falsified documents provided by the Investigation Bureau and presented by the prosecutor, forcibly levied taxes on Tai Ji Men under the guise of a cram school. The National Taxation Bureau neglected its responsibilities by failing to conduct an investigation. Therefore, the first tax bill in the Tai Ji Men case was a fake bill, completely fabricated from the outset, without any verification, explanation to the parties involved, or information on the nature and amount of the income. 3 years after issuing the bill, in 2000, the Taipei National Taxation Bureau directly inquired with the Investigation Bureau, stating, "The content, nature, and amount originally approved by our Bureau are based on the information and calculations reported by your office," demanding an answer regarding the amount of the donation. This clearly demonstrates the National Taxation Bureau's repeated dereliction of duty, failing to conduct its own investigation even after the appeal was withdrawn. In fact, 30 years have passed since the Tai Ji Men case, and tax authorities have never provided any evidence of Tai Ji Men's cash flow or goods inventory related to its cram school operations. Furthermore, the tax authorities have never issued Tai Ji Men any business license. This crucial piece of evidence is entirely absent. In 1996, it was logically absurd that any cram school in Taiwan could have earned 3.2 billion new Taiwan dollars in 6 years, including tax revenue, a complete fantasy. Furthermore, running a cram school involves completely lacking profitable administrative staff, relevant documentation, invoices, books, any cash flow, salary payments, or check receipts. How could this possibly be considered a cram school by the National Taxation Bureau? This is a malicious frame-up, a fabricated tax invoice. Absurdly, after a lengthy process, National Judicial Review and remedies have proven that Tai Ji Men is not a cram school. The National Taxation Bureau initially issued illegal tax invoices for 6 years, 5 of which have been corrected to 0. Why was Tai Ji Men labeled a cram school, charging tuition only in 1992? The fact is, the Tai Ji Men Qigong Academy has been established for 60 years since 1966. Why was it labeled a cram school only 1 year, while the other 59 years were dedicated to Qigong and martial arts practice? Such a blatant and absurd error. Do tax officials who have passed national examinations not understand this? What's frightening is that this absurd error has remained unresolved in Taiwan for 30 years. What is most worrying about Taiwan's Ministry of Finance and National Taxation Bureau today is their unwillingness to confront their mistakes. Even when dealing with a group of tens of thousands, they can so blatantly use administrative and judicial means to persecute people. What are ordinary citizens supposed to do when faced with such situations? Dr. Hong Taozi, the Zhangmanren, leader of Tai Ji Men, upholds love for Taiwan and insists on fairness, justice, and truth. To defend Taiwan's legal, moral, and ethical bottom lines, he has endured 30 years of seemingly endless administrative litigation. The time, manpower, and money spent by Tai Ji Men and its disciples far exceed the amount of tax evaded on the falsified tax bill issued by the National Taxation Bureau. The Tai Ji Men case has now been submitted and petitioned to the UN Human Rights Council 12 times by international NGOs. How can the Taiwanese government, which prides itself on democracy, the rule of law, and human rights, ignore this? British sociologist Professor Eileen Barker, Honorary Professor of Sociology at the London School of Economics, LSE, and recipient of the Order of the British Empire, OBE, said, "The Tai Ji Men case exposes the self-contradiction and abnormal state of the Taiwanese government. Since the judicial system has already acquitted Tai Ji Men and awarded compensation for wrongful imprisonment, the administrative agencies should not go against this and continue to seize their assets using tax bills. The arrogance of government officials who refuse to admit their mistakes is destroying Taiwan's hard-won rule of law and international reputation." Now, from the first to the third generation of disciples born and raised in the Tai Ji Men case, all have filed complaints with the Taiwanese government against the National Taxation Bureau for illegal tax collection and abuse of power in seizing land for their practice. We must seriously reflect on the fact that Taiwan's rule of law and the right to taxation are already systemic problems with deep-seated corruption. For 30 years, despite suffering from both legal and tax persecution, Dr. Hong Taozi, the leader of Tai Ji Men, has led his disciples to 123 countries worldwide, dedicated to promoting Tai Chi culture and upholding the mission of love and peace. This has earned them high regard and praise from leaders around the world. This is truly a high-quality cultural organization that loves the world, the country, and its people. For the sake of our next generation and for the long-term stability and development of Taiwan, I hope our government, from the president to all relevant officials, will immediately address and resolve the Tai Ji Men case. Let human rights and progress in Taiwan not become mere slogans, but truly allow Taiwan to stand tall on the international stage, and let the people living on this land no longer live in fear of legal and tax evasion, but move towards a truly happy, democratic, and advanced nation.
Yes, Willie, I will shortly summarize the Mandarin speech, and that's a short summary. He is an environmental engineering technician and former Army Sergeant Major, and he described how Qigong practice transform his emotional stability, health, and family relationship, saving him from compulsory spending and debt. He recalled the damage caused by hundreds of defamatory media reports after the Tai Ji Men case started in 1996, and the years he spent trying to explain the truth to relatives and colleagues. He described his participation in long pilgrimage and 1,145 kilometer walk around Taiwan to raise awareness about tax and legal reform and pray for the country. And he also explained how the National Taxation Bureau relied on falsified data, failed to produce evidence of the alleged cram school operations, and issued a fabricated tax bill. And he cited international concern, including statements by well-known sociologist Eileen Barker, and call on the government to resolve the case for the sake of future generations. And now I will pass back to Willy Fautrey if he still wants to add a comment, and then pass to Marco Respinti for the conclusion and the introduction of the final video.
Thank you, Massimo. Yeah, so it will be a summary of your summary. Indeed, so as Yi Zhangshu said, Tai Ji Men has saved his life, a life that was not emotionally stable. And but the teachings of Dr. Hong were decisively useful to make it meaningful and to make it an instrument for peace and love. And this is quite visible in this testimony in which he emphasizes the importance of values such as self-improvement, personal responsibility, emotional control, self-reflection, gratitude, and loyalty. And it is also through Tai Ji Men that he discovered the prominent role of conscience in the fight for the fight against the National Tax Office for justice and the rule of law. And I'm sure that his inspiring testimony will be kept in the memory of all those who were listening in his original language, Mandarin, about his positive and constructive, reconstructive, I would say, experience with Tai Ji Men. Thank you. Yi Zhangshu, sorry. And the floor now is back to Massimo, who will introduce the person who will conclude this webinar.
Yes, our final speaker is Marco Respinti, also well known as a friend of Tai Ji Men. We just recently visited Taiwan once more, and he will offer some conclusions and then introduce the final video, which is a summary of the participation of Tai Ji Men together with myself and other scholars in a session at the World Conference on Religious Dialogue and Cooperation last month in Skopje, North Macedonia. So Marco Respinti, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Massimo. Thank you, Willy. Thank you, everyone, the speakers and dizi. Yes, I'm just back from Taiwan, particularly Kaohsiung, the wonderful place of the Buddha Museum for Guangshang, where I participated. I had the honor and privilege to defend religious liberty and specifically Tai Ji Men, advancing the Tai Ji Men case at a very important scholarly symposium, which I shyly entered in since I'm a journalist, and it was organized by the East Asia Association for the Scientific Study of Religion. Very important occasion. We have had a very rich webinar today, particularly rich on this special occasion, and it is my honor to before just ending, propose some conclusion. As we all know, 19 years ago, on July the 13th, 2007, the Supreme Court of the Republic of China in Taiwan conclusively ruled that Tai Ji Men, which had been accused of wrongdoing since December 1996, was not guilty of fraud, tax evasion, or any violation of the tax laws, contrary to what certain corrupt bureaucrats had falsely maintained for years. Tai Ji Men's shifu, grandmaster, his wife, and two dizi, disciples, who had been unlawfully detained, were awarded state compensation for their wrongful imprisonment. It was an historical ruling, the fitting culmination of a judicial process in which court after court had completely exonerated Tai Ji Men. The accusation had been fabricated and were entirely without foundation. Yet, almost 2 decades later, the Tai Ji Men case remains unresolved. The National Taxation Bureau continued to issue unjustified tax bills. All of them were eventually corrected to zero, except for the one relating to 1990. Based on the 1992 bill, the movement's land and other assets were unlawfully confiscated, nationalized, and auctioned off. We gather today under the title Illegal Victory and Administrative Injustice, and rightly so. Despite its complete vindication at every level of the Taiwanese judicial system, the Tai Ji Men case remains a paradigmatic example of intolerable administrative abuse directed against innocent citizens, resulting in serious violations of their human rights and religious freedom. The important series of webinars that CHESNUR, the Center for Studies on New Religions, and HRWF, Human Rights Without Frontier, have been organizing for years is a call to awareness and action. Today, I wish to conclude by recounting a famous story of steadfastness and courage in the face of despotism and injustice, one whose enduring beauty can inspire nobility of heart and perseverance in the pursuit of truth. It is the story of a case of fiscal tyranny, making it particularly apt in the context of the Tai Ji Men case. In the dim and distant England of old, Robin Hood fought against lawless oppressors. His exploits were preserved in the popular ballads later famously collected by the American folklorist Francis James Child. He was neither a champion of wealth redistribution nor a hero of class warfare. Rather, he stood for a humane society founded on justice, private property, and limited government. He resisted tyranny. But another legendary figure had fought the same battle before him. She was a noble Saxon lady, married to the powerful Earl Leofric of Mercia. She was probably born around the year 990 and may have died in 1067. Her name was Godgifu, which in Old English means gift of God. Blue-eyed, dark-haired, voluptuous yet chaste, enchanting and devout, she has come down through the centuries in her Latinized name, Lady Godiva. Leofric and Godiva were generous rulers, renowned for their benefactions to monasteries and religious houses. Leominster, Chester, Much Wenlock, Worcester, and Evesham all bore the mark of their patronage. Around 1043, they rebuilt the town of Coventry, which Danish incursions had laid waste. There, they also founded a new Benedictine abbey dedicated to St. Mary. Behind every act of Leofric's generosity stood Lady Godiva. Behind every great man, in fact, stands a great woman. Behind every great king, a great queen. Sir Leofric was a good man, yet in the end, the lust for power overcame him. One day, he burdened Coventry with new taxes, heavy and needless. It was a manifest injustice, a reckless act by which the ruler erased years of generosity. The people protested and resisted, yet they could not persuade Leofric to relent. Then Godiva intervened. She pleaded that the unjust taxes be abolished, for they were unworthy of a just sovereign. 3 times she made her request, and 3 times Leofric did not answer. 3 more times she pleaded, and still he remained unmoved. Exasperated, Leofric surrendered completely to greed, for avarice begets only greater avarice. He no longer remembered who he truly was. His heart longed only for power and wealth. Yet Godiva did not lose heart. She continued to implore him for mercy. At last, Leofric spoke. He declared that he would grant her request only if she humbled herself by riding naked through the streets of Coventry, exposed to the mockery and lust of the people. Godiva was horrified. She offered God prayer, penance, and fasting. At last, for the sake of justice and the common good, she accepted the challenge laid before her by the evil man her once noble-hearted husband had become. On a night bathed in brilliant moonlight, the gentle mother of her people slowly removed her noble garments with regal dignity, as though performing a nuptial rite or a sacred liturgy. She descended to the royal stables, mounted the finest of steeds, and rode through the streets of Coventry. The people gathered in morbid curiosity, yet when Godiva appeared advancing slowly and majestically in her sorrow, no one saw her nakedness. They beheld only purity, innocence, and radiant whiteness. Tradition tells that one man dared to raise his eyes with lust upon her, and that God struck him blind. Godiva had nothing to offer but herself, and herself she offered, like a martyr before her persecutors, as Christ himself had done. Leofric refused at first to believe the gods, who hurried to tell him what was taking place. He had never imagined that the queen would carry out such a deed. Astonished and overcome, he rushed to her. He fell to the ground in defeat. Rising again, he felt only shame for himself. He realized that it was he, not she, who stood naked. In that instant, all his wickedness melted away. He came to his senses. With a broad gesture, he removed his own cloak and wrapped it around his beloved wife. She smiled gently. Leofric repealed the unjust taxes because of that heroic woman, and Coventry was once again able to flourish in justice. The graceful English poet Alfred Lord Tennyson immortalized this motif in his poem entitled simply Godiva, written in 1840 and published 2 years later. Quote, "To meet her lord, she took the tax away, and built herself an everlasting name." End of quote. It is a beautiful myth that, like all great stories, conveys profound truths. Justice is restored through personal sacrifice when men and women offer nothing less than themselves. For in the end, the only thing they truly retain is their very selves. Tai Ji Men's shifu and dizi have sacrificed everything they possess, even enduring imprisonment and deprivation for crimes they never committed. They have become sacrificial lambs upon the altar of arbitrary power. May they, like a new Lady Godiva, soon witness the day when their own Leofric awakens, repents, and restores justice. Thank you so much for your kind attention. We now have time to see the conclusion, the real conclusion of our webinar today, which is the video. I'm sure a very nice, colorful video as usual, which contains highlights of the Fourth World Conference for Religious Dialogue and Cooperation. Thank you.
The Balkan Peninsula is one of Europe's most important crossroads of cultures and religions. North Macedonia, located in the heart of the region, is not only the birthplace of Nobel Peace Prize laureate Mother Teresa, but also home to a rich history shaped by both Orthodox Christianity and Islam. From June 22 to 25, 2026, scholars, experts, and participants from around the world gathered in Skopje, the capital of North Macedonia, for the Fourth World Conference on Religious Dialogue and Cooperation. The conference explored emerging forms and complex causes of religious conflicts and examined how dialogue can foster mutual understanding and help build peace in a world facing increasing divisions and tensions. During this international gathering, 3 Tai Ji Men dizi representatives shared experiences and stories from Taiwan, highlighting the important lessons of the Tai Ji Men case regarding religious freedom, the rule of law, and the culture of conscience. As Tai Ji Men celebrates its 60th anniversary, the representatives also presented perpetual calendars on behalf of Dr. Hong Taozi to distinguished guests, sharing 6 decades of efforts to promote love, peace, and conscience while conveying friendship and goodwill across borders. On the morning of June 24th, a forum entitled Conflict, Spirituality, and the Primacy of Conscience, a comparative perspective on the Tai Ji Men case in Taiwan, brought together experts and scholars from various countries to discuss religious freedom, human rights protection, and the spirit of the rule of law. Rosita Shoraite, chair of the International Coalition for Religious Freedom, said that when states fail to understand diverse beliefs, misclassification can cause institutional harm. She added that the Tai Ji Men case raises broader issues of religious freedom, taxpayer rights, and the protection of minority groups. Argentine scholar Maria Varde notes that in the Tai Ji Men case, red envelope offerings were misclassified as tuition fees. Although the court found no tax evasion and recognized them as gifts, some tax claims still persist, raising concerns about administrative misclassification, religious freedom, and state power. Tai Ji Men dizi Yang Ming Sheng reflected on the historical experiences of the Balkan region. He explained that the true purpose of religion is to inspire goodness and moral values. Conflicts are often caused not by religion itself, but by political manipulation, as well as human greed, selfishness, and division. For many years, Dr. Hong Taozi has led the Tai Ji Men Cultural Goodwill Delegation to 123 countries, promoting love, peace, and conscience through cultural exchanges. Their mission is to awaken the conscience within every individual so that religion may become a force for unity and peace rather than a source of conflict. Tai Ji Men dizi and law student Wang Yuran shared her observations from a legal perspective. She pointed out that transparency and integrity are essential for ensuring accountability and preventing the abuse of legal authority. However, even the most sophisticated legal system cannot replace human conscience. When conscience is absent, laws can become instruments of injustice. Using the Tai Ji Men case as an example, she emphasized that religion should never be exploited by political or institutional interests, but instead should serve as a force that protects conscience and promotes peace. Cheng Yunhao introduced the culture of Tai Ji Men Qigong and shared his family's personal experiences. He explained that his wife once lost her voice due to thyroid cancer, but gradually regained her health after practicing Qigong at Tai Ji Men. This experience helped the entire family understand the importance of balance in body, mind, and spirit. He emphasized that Tai Ji Men is not only a practice for self-cultivation, but also a platform for conscience education that helps people build healthier and happier lives. Italian sociologist of religion Massimo Introvigne noted that throughout history, many minority religious groups have suffered unfair treatment due to misunderstanding and prejudice. He suggested that the Tai Ji Men case offers an important opportunity for the international community to reflect on religious freedom, human rights protection, and the principles of the rule of law. During the conference, participants visited Orthodox monasteries, mosques, the Mother Teresa Memorial House, and the historic Old Bazaar of Skopje. These visits offered a deeper appreciation of the long tradition of coexistence and mutual respect among different religions in North Macedonia and reinforced the value of interfaith understanding and cultural exchange. In just 4 days, the conference bridged more than geographical distances. It connected cultures, religions, and hearts. Through sharing their personal experiences and the culture of conscience, the Tai Ji Men representatives brought Taiwan's message of peace to the world. Through sincere dialogue and cultural exchange, they expressed the hope that when conscience and love become a common language, people everywhere can work together to create a more peaceful and sustainable future.